Okay, we have our Illustrator file set up. Let's start building our wireframe layout. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go and grab my rectangle tool out of the toolbox. This guy right here. Go ahead and grab that guy. You can tap your M key on your keyboard as well if you wish. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm actually going to be a little bit sloppy about this because I want to show you some cool tricks here. I'm going to just click and drag out a rectangle, something like this. I'm not even really being careful about it. And as a matter of fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer on this just so you can see what I'm doing here. By the way, if you want some keyboard shortcuts here, I'm using Control plus or Command plus and minus to zoom in and out. So Control plus, Control minus, Command plus, Command minus if you're on the Mac to zoom in and out. Okay, so there's my rectangle that I drew there towards the top of my page. Now, right off the bat, I don't know if you'll see this on your screen, but as I'm moving my mouse around, I see these tiny little bits of text appearing and these lines and so on. It gets a little bit irritating, actually. These are called smart guides. I'm going to head up to my view menu here. And then we have this option right here, Smart Guides. I'm going to go and turn that off. I find them quite irritating, quite annoying as I'm trying to build out my layout here. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to switch out to my selection tool, my black arrow tool at the very top of the toolbox. Go ahead and grab this guy. This allows me to, of course, grab the object and move him around and so on. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make use of my transform panel. Now, you can access your transform panel from your options bar way up in the top right corner. You could click on transform and access your transform commands if you wish. Or what you can do is you can access the actual transform panel itself from the window menu. And I think that's what I'm going to go after. Okay, so I'm going to head up to the window menu here and then all the way down to transform. You'll see them there. It's an alphabetized list. So look for your T's and then look for transform. So here's my transform panel. Now inside the transform panel, I don't know if you've used this guy before or not. He's very, very handy. We have four primary options. We have X and Y and then width and height. All right. So what I'm interested in right now is the dimensions, the size of the object that I just created. When I created this object, don't forget I was very haphazard about it. I just threw it down onto the page, knowing that I was going to come into the transform panel and set some specific dimensions for this guy. So here's the dimensions that I'm going to use. For the width, I'm going to use 960. All right, so the same width as our document. I'm going to use my tab key to advance forward to the height field. And for the height, I'm going to use 130, just like that. And you can either hit tab or you can hit enter to lock that in. Perfect. That's exactly what we want. All right, now the next thing that I want to do is I want to position this guy correctly as well. This is where the X and Y coordinates come in. I don't know if you know about X and Y coordinates. The short and sweet, sometimes I think of, the game Battleship. Sometimes I think of battleships. So how this is going to work is X is horizontal, the horizontal positioning. Y is the vertical. And this little area here sets the reference point for the X and Y. So check this out. I'm going to click on the top left corner for this little reference area. And now the X and Y values are basically displaying the relationship between the top left corner of the object and the top left corner of the page. So in other words, if I set the X and Y values to 0, each of them to 0, then my object is going to sit way up in the top left corner of the page, which is exactly what I want. Okay? So I'm going to set my X value here to 0, you guessed it, and I'll tab forward and I'll set the Y value to 0 as well and hit enter. And now the top left corner of the object sits in the top left corner of the page. Okay. Again, you can think of the battleship grid if you want, or a piece of graph paper or something like this. Awesome. That's exactly what we want. Okay. Now the next thing that I want to do is I want to throw on just some quick temporary color onto this guy. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to head over to my swatches panel way over on the right-hand side. You should see them kicking around there on the right-hand side. If you don't, just head to your window menu and look for swatches. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that my fill color down in the bottom area of the toolbox is on top. He should be on top. And I'm just going to choose kind of a light gray, maybe like a mid-gray, something like this. Okay, you can use literally whatever colors you want, but whenever I'm wireframing, I like to use grays. And what I want to do now is I want to set the stroke color or the outline color for this guy as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tap my X key on my keyboard. That flips me between the fill color and the stroke color at the bottom of the toolbox. So just tapping X flips you between the two, okay? And then with the stroke color in focus there at the bottom of the toolbox, I'm now going to go and choose a darker gray for my stroke, maybe something like this. There we go. All right, I'm going to go and collapse down my swatches panel. And the last thing I'm going to do here before we move on is I'm going to go and head to my stroke panel. You should see him also over on the right-hand side. Once again, you can head to the window menu and look for stroke. And I'm going to expand this guy out just by clicking on his double-headed arrow there. You can increase the thickness of the line there if you want, if you so choose. And the other thing that I want to do is I want to set my stroke align. So right now the stroke is set to the center. I'm going to set mine to the inside of the object, just a very subtle difference there. And then you can go and collapse down your stroke panel. There we go. So there's our first wireframe object. That's the header for our wireframe layout. Of course, there's a whole lot more that I want to go and wireframe out here with you. So let's continue wireframing out this high resolution layout.